Hi, I'm Malika Bilal, filling in for Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, women negotiating peace. We'll discuss the potential for women's roles in conflict resolution. With me is guest digital producer Dan Ming. Dan, I know the conversation has already gotten started, and there's a difference between what men and what women are tweeting us, right?
Yeah, so we asked this question, do men and women see conflict differently? And all of the no's came from men, interestingly enough. So if you look at my computer here, Aaron tweets, I think people view conflict resolution differently. Power dynamics play more into these negotiations than gender. So of course, we want all of you at home to weigh in on this debate. Do men and women see conflict differently? Tweet us with the hashtag AJStream.
Looking forward to those tweets. Now, this is a show that's driven by you. So tell us what's going on in your part of the world. To do that, just head over to facebook.com/AJStream, and your story could wind up right here in the stream.
Yeah, Chad, aka Master Francis, straight from Senegal, Kyrgyz, worldwide. I'm in the stream. Watch out.
In high-level peace talks, the voices of women remain largely excluded, and few have roles as conflict mediators and negotiators. While increasing female participation is a widely supported goal, why aren't more women getting a seat at the negotiating table? And could their participation improve long-term security? Well, to talk about this, we have 4 women from around the world to share their experiences in peace building. We have Irene Santiago of the Mindanao Commission on Women. She's a former peace negotiator who helped broker a ceasefire between the MILF separatist group and Philippines government. She's joining us from Jakarta. In Juba, South Sudan, Rebecca Akwachi is a founding member of Sudanese Women for Peace. She is currently South Sudan's Minister for Telecommunications and Postal Services. In Pristina, Kosovo, Kate Fearon is a founding member of the Northern Ireland Women's Coalition. She was Chief of Staff in the negotiations for the 1998 Good Friday Agreement between the UK and Northern Ireland. And in Gaziantep, Turkey, Raja Al-Telli is an activist and co-founder of the Center for Civil Society and Democracy in Syria. Welcome to the stream, everyone. Now, I actually want to start on my laptop with some stats. This is from UN Women, Women's Participation in Peace. Now, of 31 peace processes between 1992 and 2011, here are the figures. 4% of signatories, women made up, 2.4% of chief mediators, 3.7% of witnesses, and 9% of negotiators. So Irene, women make up half of the society. Why is it that their numbers in the peace process are really in the single digits?
Well, I see 3 barriers that really impinge on this issue. Number 1 is conceptual, number 2 is technical, and the third one is political. So on the conceptual side, what is a peace negotiation? It's seen as ending war. So only the war actors are around that table. So we have to change, if we want women in, we will have to change the concept. Then number 2, technical. We just don't have the experience many times to be in that public space. And number 3, political. I think many people think that it is largely just, oh, the women don't have experience, the women don't have this kind of expertise. But really, it is about politics. How influential are we to be able to get at that, around that table?
Okay, I'd love you to pick up on the points that Irene made, especially that first one about being at the table, the war table, so to speak, because if they're not the actors in war, then they're not necessarily the ones that will be there to end it. Kate?
Sorry,
it's okay.
I wasn't sure. Yeah, I mean, it really resonates with me what Irene said, particularly on the conceptual level, because what happened with us is we really broke the concept that women, that we really wanted to broaden and deepen the type of actors and the range of experience that was at the negotiating table. In Northern Ireland previously, there had been at least 3 or 4 different rounds of negotiations in the 1970s, the 80s, and in the early 1990s. And none of those had worked because they were all focused very narrowly on who's going to get what in government. And what we wanted to bring to the table was, well, what kind of government do we want and what kind of society do we want to be governed? And so we were interested in bringing our experience of being excluded from those political elite processes as women. And we've also tried to encourage other actors in civil society, other non-traditional political actors. We wanted to use all of the resources that we had as a society in building the peace.
All right, so going back to that issue of the exclusion of women from peace processes, I'd like to get Rebecca into the conversation. Rebecca, we have a tweet here from Nabila. It says, "Our contexts are such that women and girls are viewed as passive victims rather than active citizens." So what do you think about that? Is there a problem in the way that women are perceived in negotiations?
Yes, that's right. Looking at the word victims, when you are a victim, you are always vulnerable, you are always helpless, you are always bringing nothing apart from crying around, apart from looking for sympathy. But when you are an actor, an active person, then you are there to assert your position, you are there to participate, you are there to bring new ideas, and you are there to contribute to change. Many a times women are looked at as victims, and some women enjoy that. That's why they remain always as the crying ones, and then they are not included because they are perceived to be those who will be crying around the table, who will give up very quickly, who will not bring more to the table apart from crying. So this is a concept men look at women that way, but also I always say women should be contributors to telling everyone that they are not victims, they are party. And therefore, when they assert that, they will be seen as active, as actors, as people who are bringing something to the table, but not as victims.
Irene?
You may find few women, but women must assert their position and come out to be actors.
Well, we could see from the United Nations Security Council resolution on women, peace, and security. I mean, that was passed in the year 2000. It is almost 15 years. But most of the work has really been on protection, which is not to say that it's not important. It is very, very important. But there's another pillar to the Security Council resolution. And the pillar was on the agency of women, the leadership of women. And that's the part that seems to be very difficult to implement. And Rebecca is right. This is the pillar that we need to work on. And that's the reason why I emphasize the barrier, and that barrier is political. And I think we can discuss that as during this whole hour, we can discuss that, because I think that's the more important thing. I mean, protection is good, but we really need women's agency and leadership.
I am interested in discussing that. Unfortunately, it's not an hour, it's only 30 minutes. So Reja, I want to go to you with that and talking about that pillar. How active are women in the Syrian peace process? What do you see?
Yeah, so the Syrian women are active on many levels. So maybe I will talk about the local level, the national level, and the international level. We work with women who are like mobilizing and lobbying for implementing ceasefire on the ground, even though if it's in a very local area. There are some women who are working with demobilizing, especially with the children. We know that like the Syrian crisis is went very far, and then there are children who are carrying weapons, and there are many women who are active in like raising awareness about like disarmament of children mainly. And also there are many activities and many work is done, especially by women, on like building bridges and bringing people together from different ethnicity. From
but Raja, do you think that
background.
those are things that uniquely women bring to the table that they can do, whereas men can't do them in that same way?
So I want to tell you a little bit about the barriers that Syrian women especially like they are finding in order to have their voices heard, and then like also what women can bring to the table in when they are included, and whenever we are interacting between women and civil society. So it's not only the voice of women are marginalized, also the voices of civil society are marginalized in the Syrian context, and I think also around the world. Like we saw the statistic that you brought by the UN Women, and also we can do the same for civil society. So the barrier, you have the international framework. Usually when we are talking about like peace process or peace negotiation, we are always thinking about the armed people who are supposed to be talking with each other. We are not concerned, even though they are like minority, we are not really talking about like people, like the voice of the civilians who are affected by the conflict, and their voice, they are more concerned about bringing like the solutions to the table. So this is one of the barriers. The other barrier always, like in the Syrian context especially, you have like the social like constraints. Like in the Middle East, you have like more like masculine mentality. So it's much like women need to do much more work in order to be in a leadership position. And also you have the security concern, which is really like you have it from different part. Like you have the bombing in Syria, you have the checkpoints. Like everyone is afraid about their family and their like relatives, and then also you have the extremists and the bombing. So it's like many challenges, and in the same time we saw women, like we have the Syrian Women Initiative for Peace and Democracy.
I want to pause you there, Reja, just because you mentioned 3 significant barriers, and so I really want to pick those apart so we can get an idea of how similar those experiences are for people in other parts of the world. Dan, I know that people online are asking about some of those barriers.
We're getting questions, and I actually want to pose this one to Kate. So Kenichuku tweets in, she says, what's been their experience so far? Have the meetings been largely a male affair, and what have been the reactions to them? So Kate, you've been involved with the peace process in Northern Ireland and different negotiations around the world. What have you noticed about the gender dynamics when women are involved?
Well, the first thing to say is that the gender dynamic, it exists, it's real. People, when you first enter a peace process, it is largely male, and the statistics that Malika read out at the very beginning really resonate with me. Out of our peace process, there were approximately 20-25 delegates around the table on the first day, and on the first day, only 2, which were from the Northern Ireland Women's Coalition, were women. The reactions from male politicians who had been very used to having this as their own exclusive space in the past. Not that they did a great deal with it, but it was their space, and they didn't like new people, new faces being in on it, getting in on the action. And
it
so
sounds like high school.
Well, you know what, we were regularly told to go back to the kitchen, that we didn't belong here. They even spoke about the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland at that time, Mo Mowlam, who was the senior British government representative at the peace negotiations. They talked of her in terms of her feminine wiles and going to... She, at one stage, was very brave and went to speak with loyalist prisoners inside the Maze prison in Northern Ireland, and they talked about her batting her eyelids at the prisoners. Another man told us that, another man from one of the parties told us that God made man and only then made women, and who were we to question the Lord Almighty about what our place in society was. So there was a lot of attitudinal barriers, actually very direct and in our face when we went in. So we had to very quickly develop a thick skin, which we had, which was useful for us. But we just had to really believe in ourselves, believe in the experiences, even though they were very different, the experiences that we brought to the table. And those were experiences, you know, not just saying as women we all felt the same thing, we all experienced different things. Some people were from different communities, different backgrounds, but there were 3 organizing principles for our coalition. They were human rights, equality and inclusion, and those were the principles around which we organized and around which underscored all of our policies.
Right, and Rebecca, I saw you nodding your head. What is it often like to be the only woman at the table?
Yeah, it's not an easy matter, but again, let me give the experiences of the women of South Sudan. The power of mobilizing, the power of coming together, the power of supporting one another. This is what we have done in South Sudan. Whenever we have 1 or 2 women at the table, we are never far from there. It's very challenging, yes. People will tell you anything they want to say. But again, it is an attitude. And when it is an attitude, it's something you can manage. You have to be there. And I mean, from the very beginning, when these concepts were brought about the conceptual, the technical, and the political, these things will always be coming up. What we did as the women of South Sudan is to always arm ourselves, you know, against these challenges without making anybody angry. But you have to be there, you have to be present, and then you have to also communicate with your sisters behind there, and given that push, and be prepared. You know, if they are talking about your knowledge, arm yourself with knowledge. If they are talking about you not looking good, dress well, look so look so smart and so beautiful, and be there very strong. So the challenges are there, but the women of South Sudan always said, look, once you are at the table, we are outside there. Don't feel left alone, and will always be there to push you. And what we used to do when we had women in Naivasha in Kenya during the negotiations of the peace processes that led to the comprehensive peace agreement that brought the end of the war in South Sudan, we will always go into buses, go and visit them, and always be there to keep them strong.
Rebecca,
Yeah.
I like the knowledge and the beauty.
Yes.
And it's always very, I think it's also very important to know, how do you get in?
Yeah.
You know, I was a
Yes.
negotiator for 3 years,
Yes.
and people always ask me, how did you get in? I said, I got a call saying, please support me. I'm going to be the chair of the peace negotiating panel. And I told this friend of mine who was now the chairman, I said, I'm not going to support you. I want to sit at the table. I know as much as you do. So why don't you make me a member of the panel and not just a supporter? So that's how I got in. And how do you then stay in is the important thing. How do you stay in?
Yes.
And how do that you make them take you seriously? I think it's very important.
Yes.
So when they see us as a single issue person, meaning to say we don't talk anything but women and gender and all of that, then we're very, very easily marginalized. Okay? And then and that's a soft issue as far as they're concerned. So the important thing for us, I think, is to know what issues are that are on the table, and what is the women's perspectives on those issues. So I became very, very fast.
So Irene,
an expert ceasefire.
Irene, we have some tweets on this. Barbara writes in, I think women in general are less egotistical and more motivated to reach a fair settlement. Of course, there are exceptions. And then Leslie, she responds to this. She says, the unique qualities that women bring to the table isn't really the issue, because women are 50% of the population and have a right to play a leadership role in peace building. So I want to throw this question to you, Irene. Do you think that the insistence on the unique qualities that women bring to the table distracts from the issue that it should be a right to be at the table, because women are 50% of the population?
I think the reality is that both are important. It is important because it is our right to be there. It is important because we have, and I think this is how I convinced the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. This is how I convinced. I didn't go to them with equality, rights, you know, all of those. I said, you are building a new nation, and women have life experiences that are different from men. So don't you think that as you build your new nation, that you should take the perspectives of women because their life experiences are different from men? That did it. I mean, they got it.
So it's really about the framing of the question for you then, Irene.
It is a valid issue for them. It became valid for them because they understood what it was. But if I went there and said, we have these rights, we have this, you know, I think it's also a matter of strategy, and it's a matter of tactic. You know, you can't keep doing the same thing and saying the same thing all the time.
Right. Well, Raja, I want to bring you back in here with the question that are there issues that get left off the table when women aren't involved in the peace talks? Specifically in your experience, are there topics that you think get missed?
Yeah, so I just want to say that, like, it seems like every time we are having like peace process, we have like the woman has to struggle again and again to be on the table, even though as like on Twitter said that like 50% of the population are women, and there should be an international mechanisms to guarantee that women should be on the table. We shouldn't be like in every country, in every context, whenever we have conflict, then we have to do the like the fighting again. There should be even though we have 1325, the Security Council resolution, but it's not guaranteeing that women are on the table, even though they are bringing like different perspective. So we talked about the challenges, but in the same time, sorry, Erin?
No, Raja, why? I mean, you know, the international, we fought so hard for policies, for instruments, for legal, whatever. We fought so hard for those. So what
the international mechanisms needs to include, like, when we are bringing the two fighting party, in the same time we need to have the mechanisms to have also the voice of women and civil society on the table. And women, when they are on the table, they definitely bring a different perspective, especially like when we are talking about like stressing on like the genderized like the agenda, like when we are talking about the future of Syria, for example, we cannot speak about like any implementation without half of the society. Like women can stress more about like education, psychosocial support, disarmament, etc. So those are very important issues to be on the table when women are there.
All right, so we have a
Maybe I come in. Shall I come
Rebecca,
in
go
just
ahead.
to say why the experiences of South Sudan were a bit different? It's because South Sudan, we were already in a revolution, the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, and we were part of that revolution. And the revolution was for the emancipation of the whole country, including the women. And from the very beginning, we said, like, we are fighting two wars. One is one war for our rights as a nation, for our identification, but also we want the women to be liberated. So we started from day one working together with our men. And we walk them through that processes. Every time we went, we are there at the front line, we are there nursing the wounded, we are there feeding the children and the old, and therefore we walk them through our situation, and that's why this issue of percentage of women came during the revolution, and it was recognized by our leadership. Now, when we came to talk about the negotiations, already the leadership in South Sudan was aware of our roles, of our strengths, of our ability, and therefore it was not a very big fight. So when it comes to negotiating peace, there is no way you can leave us out. We have been part of that revolution. And it gave us really a place on the table. But I'm also concerned about other women in other parts of the world. That is why we all have to bring our experiences together to see how women in other countries could also assert their presence by,
and which is why you sharing your experiences now is so helpful.
Yes.
I want to head over into the post show in just a bit, but before we do, I want to end with a community tweet, because I know the community has a lot to say about what you are sharing with us.
Right,
so Dan,
to sum it all up, we have a tweet that just came in from Iran. She says, "Women, though not war actors, are deeply affected by it, and any hope to build sustainable peace and reconciliation must include them." So I think that's a note to leave on.
Right. And talking about advice from all of you for the people that are watching, but that'll have to be in the post show. On the next show, we'll speak with freed Al Jazeera reporter Abdullah Al-Shami about his time in prison in Egypt and life after being released. You can send us your questions for him and we'll pose them in tomorrow's show. But for now, stay with us. The post show on women and peace building, it's next at streams@aljazeera.com. We'll see you online. Welcome back. This is the Stream's online post show. We're talking about women's roles in peace building and conflict resolution. We'll get right back to the conversation. Kate, I know you wanted to say something, but there's also a tweet here that's directed to you, and so I'll let Dan read that. Okay. Go ahead, Dan.
So Vanita in Nepal asks on Twitter, she says, what does peace building entail for an ordinary woman such as myself? Is conflict resolution considered a citizen initiative? So Kate, what do you think about that? How do people get involved on the everyday level?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's very much a citizens' initiative, and that people should always take the opportunity to get involved if they can. We talked a little bit earlier about the different types of international instruments that are available, and I think they are great. Things that are working at the governmental level and things that you can lobby your government on. But on the ground is where we certainly started our coalition, and we took advantage of a very unique electoral system that enabled us to be actually elected as delegates to talks at the time. I think we were just as surprised, if not more so, than a lot of our male politicians when we actually were successful after forming 6 weeks before the initial election and actually got elected. But I wanted to pick up on a point about, we spoke a little bit earlier about different things that women take to the table with them, and that very much resonates with my experience, which was, for example, our issue was, usually when you talk peace, people are talking about territory and who gets what and who, how to divide up the spoils. And we were more interested in putting more on the table before dividing everything up and sharing everything out. So if you like, making the cake bigger before slicing it up so everybody got a part. So for example, in our context, the big thing was about, who gets to govern. We were interested in, well, what's the social and economic outcome? What's our social and economic vision for our society in the future? What's the role of victims how do we get the roles of victims' voices around the table? How do we get the role of political prisoners' voices around the table? And they are very tough issues. For those two issues, for the same party to be putting those on the table were very tough because they're almost diametrically opposed. The people who are in prison are almost inevitably the people who have made victims and victims' relatives. So, for example, in the first submissions to our talks, chairpersons under Senator Mitchell, we were the only party that talked about having the role of victims and of reconciliation. And I think this issue of dealing with the past is something that every peace process has to deal with. Different people do it in different ways. South Africa famously has the Truth Commission. Other people have different variations of the Truth Commission. But what we were interested in women was presenting a vision of the future and not just trying to say, well, this is my definition of what the past was, and this is who was responsible and who was to blame for the past. So I think our experiences as women of being excluded, of being kept out of the political process was a key motivator for being involved, but also enabled us to look at it a little bit differently and to take a different set of views and experiences to the table, which turned out in the end to be successful.
Right. Well, Irene, I want to go back to you because of all the people watching all around the world, some of them might be asking, well, how do you suggest we go about doing this? Because we've all given and we heard the kind of lofty ideals, it sounds like. So do you have advice for people wanting to enter into peace negotiations who are women? And with that, I will pull up your website here because I love the title of it, Women Seriously. It's on my laptop here. It's a global campaign on women, peace, and security. Irene?
The key, I think, and that's the reason why I brought up the issue of 1325. The resolution is almost 15 years old next year. Next year is Beijing plus 20 years since the Beijing conference. It will be 100 years that we have had the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. But why is it that after all of that, we're still talking about getting women at the table? Why? Because women are not taken seriously. So the campaign now is to have women be taken seriously. Public opinion must be created so that that whole of the whole international community says women have to be at the table. So key to all of this is women seriously, exclamation point.
I love that, emphatic. Well, Rebecca, in women being taken seriously, does that necessarily mean that women will then be more represented in government? Is government the end goal here?
No,
I think government.
Irene says no. Rebecca, I'd like to hear from you. We can go back to Irene. Go ahead.
Yes, government is not the end goal, because I always believe that every level is leadership. And when you are at a leadership level, wherever you are, being a director general, being a woman in the women's union is leadership. And where you are, and you can effectively influence the society, the people, the individual, then you are a leader. When you are negotiating, you put issues there that concerns everybody, and that's what women brings to the table. Always looking at areas of disadvantaged women, education, gender-based violence, the representation. But it's also important to be on the political agenda. It's always good to be in government. In my situation as a minister today, I believe that I influence policies. And if I'm there as a leader who did not go there for the sake of being called a minister, but because I have issues that I can put in parliament or in the executive, in the council of ministers, then for me, that is what it means then to get the women there. Mm-hmm. So you can be all over, be at the negotiating table.
Well, Rebecca,
but also if you are in a position of influence, that is very important, because influencing policy means then bringing new life to people.
So then, Rebecca, do you think that government is not the main goal, but it should be a very central goal? Because without women in top positions, you don't have this representation.
Yeah, because if we do that, then all of us would want to be in the government. What will happen to the civil society? What will happen to business? What will happen to investment? And you know, who will teach at the university if all of us want to be there? But it's also important, because if we remain in the other corners, we will not bring it there. And what we did actually in our experiences, for instance, in the Republic of South Sudan, before it, we made sure that the percentage for women is enshrined in the constitution. And by so doing, then now nobody was going to say, no, we only one or two of you. We have it there, so that what it means, bringing that into a level of having it in the instruments. And that will then give you a strength to be there, and you will be able then to influence the policies, to influence education for girls, for women, you know, and all these matters that concerns women.
Right. So Irene, Irene, I know that you wanted to respond to what Rebecca was saying as well. Go ahead, Irene.
I think that you know, what Rebecca is saying is useful for us to know, but we have to be very strategic. And to me, there are people who should work on the what I call the key people level, which is the policy decision-making level, and there's also a need to work on the more people level. So those two things have to work together in order for us as women to become more influential. Okay, so that's I think there is a need for us now to be smart and to be strategic.
Because you need the peace building also, Irene. You need the peace building. Yes. That's why some of us remain on the society, on the civil society, because if you don't build the peace from the grassroots, then you will be hanging up there. So that one is very important, having others to build the peace. Yeah, peace building.
I think it's safe to say that we have reached a consensus here, and so I want to thank all of our guests in this show there. Irene Santiago, Rebecca Akwachi, Kate Fearon, and Raja Al-Tilli. Now on the next show, we'll speak with freed Al Jazeera reporter Abdullah Al-Shami about his time in prison in Egypt and life after being released. You can send us your questions for him using #AJStream. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.